Hey everybody, I'm Rikki Rockett.
I'm Rowhyde.
And this is DIRTBAGGERS Academy. And what we're doing is we're trying to make some videos to help people ride better, including myself. Today we're going to talk about sand.
Yeah, sand.
Sand.
The thing everybody loves to hate.
Sand has been the bane of my existence since I first started riding on adventure bikes. You've seen me go down a couple times.
Yeah.
Today you went down, but I haven't ridden in it that much yet today, just a little bit through here.
It's pretty deep where we are.
So we're gonna go over the first main points. This is very deep, but we'll go over a couple of different things. First of all, the number one thing is what? Let's start.
Let's keep our eyes up and not look at the ground.
Why? Why would we want to keep our eyes up and not look at the ground?
So what happens is when you've got a distant frame of reference to focus on out there somewhere towards the horizon, every little movement of the bike and of your body becomes readily apparent to your brain immediately, and your brain will make your body do whatever it needs to stay in balance automatically without thinking about it. When we are looking towards the horizon, we have a much better physical frame of reference to tell our brain what our body and our motorcycle is doing. But if you look down as you're riding through the sand, or riding in general, it takes, especially with that ground moving past you, you don't have a fixed frame of reference to see what's going on. And by the time you've gotten a little off balance in the sand, it's probably too late. You're gonna fall down. And one of the things that I tell people when I train them is, if you look down in the sand, you're probably looking at your landing spot. It happens that quick.
Oh, yeah. You know, Rob did something when I trained at Rawhyde, and I think I can do it right now. The idea is if you take a stick and you're looking down and you're trying to balance it, it's hard. Now, I'm a drummer. I've been balancing sticks for a long time, so I could probably get away with it for a little while. But look what happens when I look up.
Everything gets easier.
And we're in the wind, so that helps a lot.
It does help a lot. Think about it this way as well. If you, just like that stick analogy, if you walk looking at your feet, you're probably a lot more likely to trip and fall than if you just keep your eyes up and walk ahead. Same thing riding a motorcycle. There's stuff that you're gonna walk past or ride past. Once you've seen it, you don't have to look at it again. It's not going anywhere. Keep your eyes up. Everything will happen a lot more naturally. You'll be able to balance naturally and just let your body take care of it and your brain take care of it automatically, rather than looking down and having to feel it and then correct and go back and forth. And your oscillations are gonna be huge if you're looking down, and you probably are gonna fall, especially in this kind of deep sand. If you fixate on a deep trough in the sand, that's where you're gonna end up.
I'm a deep trough. Notice how he pointed at me.
So just look at where you want to end up. You know, if I look here down the line, the sand is super deep on the right side of this riverbed that we're in, and not quite as deep on the left side. So I'm going to keep my eyes looking down the left side so that I don't end up like I did a few minutes ago over here in the deep stuff and dropping my bike.
If you have your head up, you can still roll your eyes down to scan what is immediately in front of you if you feel something. But if your head's down, it's really hard to look up.
Yes, very, very difficult. Second point in the sand is you want to be under power all the time, or at least most of the time. In other words, you want to stay on the gas and either be under power or slightly accelerating, or you want to modulate the throttle, but you want to use the throttle in the sand always. What you are trying to do is you have got to keep this bike on top. So think of riding in sand as being similar to water skiing. If we try and water ski very slowly, we're never going to get on top of the water. We're just going to barge through it. Same thing in the sand on a motorcycle, especially a heavy motorcycle, right? So my bike, the way it's set up right now, is probably about 640 pounds. I have a lot of tools, a gallon of water, you know, my bags are full of emergency gear. But when you're riding a heavy bike in sand, it's very different than riding a dirt bike in the sand, right? A dirt bike, the front wheel is going to be light all the time. These large adventure bikes, it's pretty tough to get that front wheel light. So we have to deal with it the way it is. And to do that, we've got to stay on top of the sand, which means we need some throttle.
Now, you don't want to accelerate the whole time now,
right?
Because you're going to start blazing, like you're going to run out of throttle, essentially,
True.
right?
True.
So, are you using your clutch to control
yes, absolutely.
the throttle?
You can use your clutch, or you can modulate the throttle and just go rop, 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 rop the whole way through. But here's something to keep in mind. You could accelerate the entire way, right? And curious thing about sand is that the faster you go, the easier it is to ride on. But you don't want to get going so fast that when you fall off, you get hurt. Okay, so again, we're going to use that water skiing analogy. When you're going 40 miles an hour water skiing, it's great. You fall, no big deal. You might get a nose full of water, whoop-de-doo. If you're going 75 miles an hour on the lake and you fall water skiing, it's like hitting concrete. And guess what? Sand is like that too.
Yeah.
So my advice would be, as much speed as you can carry comfortably, don't ride any faster than you're willing to fall. When we first begin to train people how to ride a big bike in the sand, we're going to limit it to about 30 miles an hour. Second gear probably would be my advice on that.
Oh, let's talk about second gear.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I like to be in second gear in the sand because I feel like the bike's less snatchy.
Yes, absolutely.
The throttle doesn't feel as snatchy. Although when I was coming up through here, you let go of the throttle, you go more forward, and you give it more throttle, and you tend to go backwards, and it makes you feel uneven, unbalanced.
Yes, absolutely. First gear is delivering a lot of torque to the ground, and in sand, too much torque to the ground at one time can cause you some issues, right? It can cause you to spin that back wheel and get it buried, let's say, or it can cause you to get offline and begin to whiskey throttle with a lot of torque, and you get oscillating back and forth, and then you go down. When you shift up a gear, even if you don't intend to speed up, now your throttle response is softer, you are less likely to spin the back tire, things like that, right? There are going to be times when we do want that tire to spin in the sand. If you have the ability to turn off your traction control, do so. Because blipping the throttle will help you in the sand, but if your traction control is turned on and you try and hit that throttle, as soon as that back wheel starts to spin, your ECU will chop power to the back wheel. And it makes it very, very difficult to navigate sand. So if you have the ability to turn off your traction control in sand, do so. If you don't have traction control, yay, you don't have to worry about it. You'll also find that blip of the throttle, whether you're in first or second gear, can straighten the bike up as well. So you'll be going through the sand, probably too slow is when this usually happens, and you start to go, uh-oh, something's going wrong. If I just nail that throttle right then, the bike will straighten itself up and I can keep going. And a lot of people have really, really good luck modulating the throttle or staying on the gas. Either or, it's a personal preference.
So you hear people talking about staying loose, getting their weight back in the sand. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yep. So the reason that you want to get your weight back is because you need to get up on top of this sand, and if your weight is too far forward, you're going to bury the front wheel, and you're just going to plow. Right? So you get your weight back, but not back so far that now you have a tendency to bury the back wheel. Right? You're trying to find, it's kind of a neutral position with your weight slightly back. You just want it back enough so that you're not pushing down and applying weight to the bars. So you want to get back a little bit, loose grip on the bars. And that's another thing that we got to talk about is staying loose on the bike. You ride in sand, the bike moves around quite a bit. It's going to be, every time it encounters a crossing track, it's going to move a little bit, and you need to allow that movement, okay? If you are gripping those bars too tightly and fighting everything that the bike tries to do in the sand, you're going to fall down, or you're going to get very, very tired very, very quickly, or both. Stay loose. Let the bike do what we call the sand dance. Going to move around a lot underneath you. It's going to wiggle. It's going to, you know, the back end will kick out. The front's going to swim a little bit. Let it do those things. The bike will always try to return to straight travel if it can. You got to let it oscillate a little bit and come back to that. Another thing is the way you weight your pegs, right? Some people have really, really good luck in deep sand just going like this on the pegs, right to left. That weighting the pegs does have an effect, and it's how you steer in sand, but it takes a little bit of time. There's a little bit of a delay there, right? So it's like steering a battleship, right? Now I can go across this whole sand wash and move my handlebars like this and just go in a straight line because I'm on top of the sand. Steering doesn't really do a lot, but weighting your pegs does, and that's how you kind of steer when you're in deep sand. Problem is you gotta plan ahead a little bit, right? So in the battleship analogy, I can crank that rudder. Does the ship turn right away? No. It's gonna take a minute before the ship starts to turn. And the same thing with weighting the pegs on a big adventure bike. You get on that right peg, it's gonna turn right eventually, but it's gonna take a second or half a second or so. So just be ready to then arrest that turn with the other peg. That's really how you steer in sand.
All right, so we talked about letting go of that throttle, and when you do, you kind of it throws the weight forward.
Yeah.
What happens if you hit the brakes?
Same thing.
Okay.
So anything that immediately slows down the motorcycle, so chopping the throttle or grabbing the brakes, either one of them, front or rear, doesn't really matter. All of these things are going to have a tendency to bury the front wheel, and it's going to do this, and over you go. So you try your best not to do those things. This is also part of keeping your eyes up. It'll help you avoid chopping the throttle, hitting the brakes, whatever, things like that. If you do need to slow down in sand, just pull in the clutch. Let the bike slow down. It'll slow down very quickly in sand. Both wheels at the same time. You don't need any brakes, and you won't bury it. If you do hit the brakes, either one of them, that front wheel is going to dig down into the sand, and you're probably going to fall over.
All right, so it's a lot of stuff to remember, but I think one of the things that I like to remember the most is kind of try to have a little fun with it, because when I overthink sand, that's when I would get myself into trouble. I was fine just going until I realized, hey, I'm in sand, and then I started to go, oh, yeah, man, whoa,
right.
You know? It's almost like when I relax with it. So hopefully I'm going to relax today.
Right?
Hopefully you're going to relax when you get out in sand, and you can keep a lot of these things in mind. Again, you know, eyes up, stay on the gas, be loose, let the bike do what it needs to do, and steer with your feet sometimes, and turn that traction off.
Yep, turn the traction control off.
Yes, and get a little weight back.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts?
Yeah, so sand is one of those things that we all love to hate. Just get yourself to the point where it doesn't cause you terror anymore, and you'll be okay. Relax. This is the key to everything on these big bikes, is relaxing. If you can relax and breathe, even when sand gets difficult, you'll be okay. If you get tensed up and you start fighting what the bike is doing, you're not going to have a good time.
Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I learned something. And Rob definitely learned something today.
Yeah.
So anyway, until next time, leave some comments about your experiences. Make sure to check out our Facebook group page, which is Dirtbaggers, and come and hang out and shoot the breeze with us on there. And just have a good time, man. Get out there and ride.